welcome everybody to part two. My name is Seth, and I'll be presenting the second half of this, aptly titled Thought for Food after Luis's. And I'll be giving a presentation on something that I'm pretty passionate about, something that I've been interested in for a few years now. I've been following it pretty closely, and that is neural interfaces, and it's something that I think can change the world. So I'm going to talk about what neural interface is, or brain-computer interface, BCI for short. I'll talk about how it works and the leaders of the industry currently. And then I'll talk about why I think we will all need one in the future. Not if we'll need one, but why I think we will need one. And then why we should also be a little bit resistant to it, give a little bit of pushback. So, what is a neural interface? Well, if you've seen Black Mirror, you already know what I'm talking about. It's that little bulb chip in their head that lets them do crazy things, like take pictures with their eyelids, or watch memories from when they were a child, or control their TV with their mind. And it seems like something that's magic and way off in the future, but it's already in development and has been for a long time now. Actually, we've been testing in humans since the 80s. And all it is really is a little implant. It could be invasive or non-invasive, and it allows a computer to read the brain signals of a human being and translate that into the actions that we're taking. So I get a stimulus in this region of my brain, maybe that's my right arm moving, or I'm thinking about how how angry I am, or if I'm nervous, or if I'm different moods that are going on in your head, and it can translate that. So let's talk about a little more on how it works. Let's start with the human brain. So this 15-pound ball on your head actually uses 20% of your body's total energy, and that's because of the 100 billion neurons that are in your brain. And to put that in perspective, 1 million seconds is a week and a half. 1 billion seconds is 31 years. 100 billion seconds is 3,170 years. So it's a lot of little neurons in this one section of your body. And what they do, each individual one is sort of like a transistor on a computer. All it is sends a little electrical signal on or off. That's it. But when you put a bunch of these together, much like a computer, it allows us to have complex thoughts, emotions. We can perform certain actions. We can even think about our own neurons. And so I'm not a neurologist, and I'm not going to be an expert, so I'm going to play this video to allow somebody a little bit smarter than me to put it in better words. Oh, shoot, you know what? Probably can't hear that, huh?
Sound, yeah. But it's fine. We learn from our mistakes, so no issue.
How's that?
The brain when you learn.
Perfect.
All right.
What's going on in the brain when you learn? In order to learn anything, whether it's math, a foreign language, guitar, or how to dribble a basketball, you need to create and strengthen pathways in your brain. Think about shooting a free throw. Know that feeling when you've got it down and don't even have to think about it? That's muscle memory. Here's the thing. Muscle memory lives in the brain, not the muscles. Your brain controls everything your muscles do, and it does this by activating specific neural pathways for each and every movement. These are functional pathways, neurons working together to achieve a goal. Say you're learning how to shoot a free throw. If it's your first time doing it, you don't yet have a pathway for that movement in your brain. You need to create it. Let's use an analogy to look at what's happening in the brain during this time. When you're first learning, your brain is like a forest full of trees and dense foliage, with no clear pathway between point A and point B. As you learn the mechanics of shooting a free throw, you create a trail through the forest. Now you can shoot the free throw because you've created that pathway in your brain, but you probably don't make many shots because it's so new. The pathway isn't very clear yet. In order to improve your free throw, you need to refine and strengthen the free throw pathway in your brain. The way you do that is through practice. Practice gradually widens the trail through the trees, turning it into a dirt road between A and B. You're starting to get pretty good now. You're making more free throws than not. You don't have to think about the mechanics as much. That's because the pathway gets stronger after each practice rep, and you've done a lot of reps. With even more practice, the dirt road turns into a paved road connecting A and B, allowing information to be transmitted at a faster rate. Now you're a 70% free throw shooter, and when you step up to the line, you don't even have to think about it. Eventually, with enough practice, what started as a trail has become a full-blown highway. Now you're a master, draining almost every free throw, and the movement is completely second nature. Scientists call this plasticity, and it's your brain's innate ability to create and strengthen connections between neurons.
All right, I just think that's really cool. So we have these neural pathways, they allow us to learn new things, but where's the neural? Like I said earlier, each neuron gives off a small electrical signal, and so we can use either an EEG, electroencephalograph, or electrodes inserted into the brain to detect these signals. And once they're detected, they are sent to a little device and typically transmitted to a stronger computing device, like a phone or a computer, where from there it is decoded using newer technologies like AI and machine learning. So like I said earlier, this is nothing new. Like, this has been around for so long. We've been able to read brain signals for quite some time now, but it's starting to advance and pick up, and our ability to interpret these signals is rapidly improving because of technologies like AI and machine learning. And then the reverse is also possible. So if we have these electrodes already inserted and we want to write to the brain or stimulate or create new pathways ourselves, synthetically, then that is also possible via deep brain stimulation. And that all that is sending a signal through the electrode rather than reading it. And so let's talk about some of the leaders in the field right now. So when we look at non-invasive products, we have Emotive. They're currently at the top, and they have several different products that are actually available to buy right now online. And they sell their own software to go with it, as well as some other video games and other tools to get that output in a cleaner format. And if you look at these pictures on the right-hand side, you can see it's a kind of a clean head strap, but you have to insert a little bit of saline into each one of those nodes, and that allows it to pick up brain signals easier. And because it's non-invasive, it has a lot of limitations right now. It can read your mood, it can read some stimulus, like whether or not you're controlling your arms, but it's not too accurate. That being said, they are still able to do a lot of crazy things. They've been putting NASCAR drivers in cars where they can only control it using their minds, and they're able to drive around a track, given it's a little donut. Still, it's pretty impressive. And then if we want to look at the invasive side of things, there's Neuralink, and that is an Elon Musk company that has been steadily improving throughout the years. And then as recent as August of last year, in 2020, they had a presentation where they announced that they've been experimenting on pigs, and so they've been putting implants inside a pig's brain and reading its emotional state as well as the sensory input from the pig's snout. And so Elon Musk actually made a joke that it was pretty easy to make a pig happy, and it's easy to detect because all you do is give it food, and then the brain waves just light up. And so if you look on this left side, you can see the design for human subjects. And if you look at that little ribbon coming off the bottom layer of the link, that is the electrodes. So there's 1,024 electrodes in there. Each individual electrode can detect and write to anywhere from 1,000 to 10,000 neurons in a brain. And so in total, that's about 1 million to 10 million neurons that can be read and controlled via this one device. And so, sorry, my dog's getting a little angry. And so, you can imagine putting 2 or 3 of these in the brain can have pretty good control of everything that's going on inside. And they also put this app out on the website. So when they actually do go to human subjects, they're going to have this iOS app where you can learn to control it yourself. You control the cursor, the keyboard, and it trains you as you get more familiar with the app. So that's all cool and everything, but what's the practical applications of this? Why is it so important? Well, there's a lot, actually. There's a lot to it and a lot you can do with it. Possibilities are nearly endless, but let's start with the medical field. This is probably the most important application right now for this kind of technology. If you look at any of these things on the right, all of these were listed in the August 2020 Neuralink demo as something that they are confident they could cure. You have things from memory loss to depression, anxiety, even addiction. All of these are just triggers in your brain. And so if you have, some way of blocking these triggers or controlling them, then all of these can be prevented. It's incredible. If you look at somebody who maybe a lot of their grandparents have had dementia or Alzheimer's, that's a terrifying disease, but with something like this can be completely prevented. And then if you look at patients who have had spinal injuries, it's tragic. Snap in the spine can completely sever the brain's connection with your limbs. And not even this technology can fix that. But it can allow them to control a prosthetic with their mind, as if they're using a regular, one of their actual limbs. So I'll show a quick demo of somebody or a group that's been working on this kind of technology. And if you notice, this is from 2012. So like I was saying, this is nothing new, but it is rapidly improving at this point.
In this paper, 2 people with tetraplegia, that is 2 people who were unable to move their arms or their legs in any functionally useful way, were able to control a prosthetic or a robotic arm simply by thinking about the movement of their own paralyzed hand. And they did that using the investigational brain-gate neural interface system. So they thought about using their own arm and hand as though they were reaching out themselves with their own limb, and the robotic arm moved much the way their own arm would have moved. One of the long-standing questions, not only in neuroscience but in neurorehabilitation, is whether the cells in the motor cortex and other parts of the brain, whether they continue to function the same way years after that original injury.
It is possible for people to use their thoughts to control devices, either a computer or a robotic arm. And the way that happens is that we implant a tiny sensor, just about the size of a baby aspirin, just into the surface of the brain, and that sensor pick up the electrical impulses from a bunch of neurons. And each of those little neurons are like radio broadcast towers putting out impulses. And when they get to the outside, a computer translator converts the pattern of pulses into something that is a command.
One of our participants was able to do something that, when all of us saw it for the first time, gave us all pause. She reached out with the robotic arm. She thought about the use of her own hand. She picked up that thermos of coffee, brought it close to her, tilted it towards herself, and sipped the coffee from a straw. And that was the first time in nearly 15 years that she had picked up anything and been able to drink from it solely of her own volition.
There was a moment of true joy, true happiness. I mean, it was beyond the fact that it was an accomplishment, I think an important advance in the entire field of brain-computer interfaces, that it was really a moment where we helped somebody do something that they had wished to do for many years.
Yeah, well, preparing this, I've watched it 4 or 5 times, makes me smile every single time. So that's great and all for the medical field, but what about people like you and I who are perfectly healthy? How would this benefit me? Well, there's a lot of answers to that. Video games to start off with. I mean, you look at Black Mirror, they have a lot of examples of that. And then Emotive is putting out a lot of video games you can control with your mind. If you look on YouTube right now, there's people using the Emotive headsets to play World of Warcraft or League of Legends. Not too well currently. The technology is still improving, but it is an ability that people can do now. In the future, I'd imagine you'd be able to just move your arm and move the in-game character's arm just like that. Any one of your day-to-day tasks, like sending emails, sending a text, even talking to someone in another room, it can all be done just using your mind. It'll get to the point where life will just become so effortless. And then, again, this is all nice, but I said that we would need this. Well, that's where Elon Musk's AI revolution theory comes in. And this is, again, just speculation, but it is pretty interesting to think about. And so I'll read this quote from him. He said, "I created Neuralink specifically to address the AI symbiosis problem, which I think is an existential threat. AI does not need to hate us to destroy us. We would roll over an anthill that's in the way of a road. You don't hate ants. You're just building a road. And the potential for intelligence in computers is far greater than in biology. So that's pretty crazy to unpack. It's a lot to unpack, and there's a lot of ways to interpret this. But to me, what he's saying is AI is rapidly improving, and if we don't treat it responsibly, it's going to surpass us. And I think it's inevitable that it will surpass us. And he also said in a podcast once, it'll get to the point where, say we're AI, talking to humans would be like talking to trees for us. You know, it's not an interesting conversation. It's just mostly one-sided. And the reason for that is because computers have a much higher bandwidth in terms of how much information they can take in at a time. See, if I want to communicate something to you guys, I could type it out. I could, use keyboard. I could talk like I am right now. But the speed of that information transfer is limited to the speed of my voice or my thumbs or my fingers. Whereas computers, Luis and I could have wrapped up all this presentation in about half a second. And so he's saying with this that to address that problem, he is hoping Neuralink will help us in our information transfer problem, so that we can prove our own worth and not get trampled by AI in the future. Which again, it's all speculation, but it's really fun to think about. So all that sounds really cool. What pushback is there? Well, I'm sure you could think of at least a few reasons why this wouldn't be wanted, but there's a lot of ways this could be misused, and currently there's no standards in place to protect anybody that would have one. I mean, if you think about the horrible things that could happen with employment, like if you sit down for an interview and the employer's just reading your thoughts, saying you're not genuine about it. What if I'm presenting, I get a notification about every single time that somebody in the audience looks at their phone or something like that? There's a lot of horrible implications that this can be misused for, especially when it comes to blackmail. Somebody can just hack into my Neuralink, dive into my deepest, darkest secrets. I don't know about you guys, I don't really want that in my life. And so there hasn't really been a lot of people addressing this yet. And there's been a lot of ethicists talking about it, but it's just all talk right now. So let's look at a real example of this being misused, or not misused, but just where it went wrong. Back in the 80s, they were testing out some deep brain stimulation, and they were using patients with Parkinson's disease. And if you don't know what that is, it's where people just don't have control of their limbs, they violently shake, and it makes it really hard to do anything, like even use a fork or a spoon. And so the goal was to stop the tremors, help them, rehabilitate. Well, it worked flawlessly. They used some crude technology, sort of like the Neuralink implant, but a lot bigger because it was the 80s. And they would stimulate certain regions of the brain. Of the 6 patients that they tested on, 5 of the 6, the moment they stimulated that region of the brain, all of the violent tremors stopped instantly. It was like they were normal people again, like they never even had Parkinson's. And so because of that great success, they left them in for a while and just studied the patients, see how they lived with it. Well, not all the patients, but some of them started to have some serious mental impact from the device in their head. Health-wise, physically, they were fine. They were, living without Parkinson's and enjoying their life. But mentally, they were losing their sense of self. They're starting to question how much of their own actions were theirs, how much of it was caused by the computer. And this led to a lot of the patients getting depressed, really, really depressed. They're losing their sense of self. This is the quote from one of the anonymous patients. She said, "How much of it is my thought pattern? How would I deal with this if I didn't have the stimulation system? You kind of feel artificial." And so that makes you think, well, if the common person does start to get these, how do we put a limit on, what thoughts can be read, what thoughts can be written? How do we stop a situation like this from happening all across the world? And right now, nobody has an answer, and that's just how it is. You know, there has to be some kind of limitation, and we have to come together to make sure that this is only used for good. So, in conclusion, neural interfaces are really cool. I think they're awesome, and I think there's a lot of potential for them, and they're starting to really, really rapidly improve. You know, by the end of 2021, Neuralink's putting a chip in a human brain, and you know, 2022, I'm sure they're going to be curing some diseases with it. And then maybe that year, the next year, they'll be learning infinitely more about the brain than we already know now. And so that's a good thing. I think, you know, it can save a lot of lives, especially a lot of older people who start to, you know, really suffer from, you know, dementia, Alzheimer's, any kind of Parkinson's, any neurological disorders, spinal injury. It can do so much good for the world. At that same time, if misused, it could also destroy us. I think it's the easiest way to make mind control a real thing with no limitation. And so if we don't address it now, I think we will be doomed. So here's all the sources I looked at to make this presentation. I encourage you to, you know, dive into it. There's a few that are really interesting. I really recommend number 14. That is the best one in my opinion. And then think for yourself, you know, if given the opportunity, would you do this? Would you put a chip in yourself? So thank you, everybody.